Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Jonathan and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a first year PhD student at the University of Waterloo. In today's video, I thought it'd be cool to do a PhD Q&A type of video to kind of answer some basic questions on what it's like being a PhD student and what it's like applying to a PhD program. So last Friday, my program actually did an open house where a bunch of the faculty and students, including myself, met with prospective candidates who were interested in the program, and we just kind of talked about some of the basic questions on what it's like being a PhD student, how do I apply, what are the things I should be looking out for as a potential applicant. So I thought it'd be a cool idea to kind of take those questions and then do a video for you guys in case you guys were interested or even thinking about what it's like to do a PhD, just because I know that it's not really talked about a lot in business school. I have a bunch of questions here on my phone, and I thought I'll just kind of run through these questions one by one and give you guys my perspective on them. So I'm gonna have a bunch of timestamps at the bottom of the video, so feel free to click to the question that you are most interested in. Okay, so with that being said, why don't we start off with question one. Okay, question one is tell us a bit about yourself. So if you guys haven't checked out my previous videos, I did a bachelor's degree at York University, BBA majoring in accounting, and then I went on to do my master's degree at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. So the degree I did was a Master's of Management and Professional Accounting, which is essentially a Master's of Accounting with a bit of an MBA twist to it. And it also came with 2 co-op terms where I worked at Ernst & Young. So after graduating, I continued to work at Ernst & Young and their audit practice for about a year full time. And then once I decided that public accounting wasn't the career path for me, I decided to move into industry, and I worked at Loblaws at their head office for about a year as an internal audit manager. And after about a year, I felt that working in industry wasn't for me, so that's when I decided to look into the possibility of doing a doctoral degree, and that's when I applied to Waterloo and luckily got in. Okay, question 2 is what were your stats when you applied to the PhD program? In terms of my stats, I think they were pretty average for a doctoral applicant. So when it comes to my GPA, my cumulative bachelor and graduate school GPA just hit the minimum requirements of an A-. So within that cumulative GPA, there are a couple of C's in my undergraduate, which I'm definitely not proud of, but luckily they didn't play a huge factor when it came to my application. So if you guys do have a couple of bad marks kind of sitting there from your first or second year, definitely don't sweat about it. As long as your cumulative GPA is looking pretty good, then I think you're totally fine. Especially if your grades are better in your 3rd and 4th year or in your master's degree, then I think you don't need to worry as much about your 1st or 2nd year grades. In terms of my other stats, for my GMAT, I got a score of 700, which I think is a pretty average score when it comes to applying as a doctoral student. Obviously, you're gonna have your people who are able to hit the mid 700s and above, but 700 is pretty competitive so far. Okay, so the third question is, why did you apply to a PhD program? So there are definitely quite a few reasons why I decided that a PhD was the right move for me. I'll say number one, my dad definitely influenced me about considering being a professor and applying for a PhD just because he's a professor himself. So from a young age, I saw him, do his PhD program and then eventually teaching and supervising other graduate students. So I've definitely been exposed to that side. And I've always kind of considered it as a possible career path for me if I decided that working full-time in industry wasn't going to work out. So that, I would say, has definitely been an overarching influence. Number 2, I genuinely do find accounting pretty interesting. I do find the material interesting in school, so the idea of doing accounting research never really turned me off. I do find it stimulating, and so far in my program, when we're reading a bunch of papers and things like that, I do enjoy it. So that's definitely something really important to consider, is that if you are going to apply to a PhD program, you definitely need to be interested in the material that you're going to be spending the next 4 or 5 years of your life on. And I think the third one is probably that I just didn't feel that working in a company was the right fit for me, and that goes for both public accounting and industry. I kind of dipped my toes in on both sides, and even though there's pros on both sides, there's definitely some huge cons to both sides that I felt that I just couldn't commit to for the rest of my life. And the main one is that I just didn't really find the work that stimulating, and I didn't really find it satisfying. Whereas when it comes to school and learning, there is some sort of satisfaction that kind of comes inherently with learning something new and uncovering new knowledge. So I think with that simple fact, that's kind of what encouraged me to apply to a PhD program when I was at Loblaws and I wasn't really loving what I was doing. And yeah, I would say those three reasons combined together is really why I decided to do a PhD program. And so far, even though the program's really tough and really stressful, I am finding it much more stimulating than working at the firm or working in industry. Okay, question 4 is, what schools did you apply for and why did you pick Waterloo? So when it comes to accounting research in Canada, I was told by some of the professors I was talking to that there are only a few schools that are, I guess, reputable when it comes to accounting research. One of them is U of T and one of them is Waterloo. And when it comes to the PhD, you definitely want to do it at a school that has a good reputation, because there's always that risk that you do your 5 years at the program and then you can't find a job at another university, because typically the university that you work at is like ranked much lower than the university that you do your PhD at. So you do want to do your PhD at a relatively reputable institution. So that's why I kind of picked U of T and Waterloo. Another reason is that I wanted to stay within Canada and specifically within the GTA, just because I have my family here, my dog Lola's here, my girlfriend's here, as well as my friends are here. So my life is pretty much built within this part of Canada, and I didn't feel ready to kind of pack up my bags and move to another part of the country or even down to the States for school, which is why I didn't apply to any American schools. So when it comes to why I decided to pick Waterloo, gotta say the simple fact is that U of T just rejected me. I was on their waiting list actually, but unfortunately I wasn't able to be one of the 2 applicants that they decided to hire for that year. So unfortunately U of T rejected me. Waterloo did hire me, even though that was their main reason why I ended up going to Waterloo. Waterloo did have a number of key advantages that I really liked. So Waterloo was definitely still a great choice for me to go to, and I'm definitely very happy that I'm a PhD student at the university. Now, when it comes to those advantages, number 1 is that I went to an open house that the University of Waterloo was hosting last year. So this was pre-COVID, and essentially it was kind of like a day in the life thing where we showed up in the morning and then we attended an information session, talked to some professors, talked to some students, and then we attended like an accounting research seminar. So on that day, there was a visiting professor from another university who came by to kind of talk about his paper. So all of the faculty and doctoral students would essentially attend that session, and then all the people who attended the open house also attended that session as well. So we got a copy of the paper beforehand, we took a read, we attended the presentation, and it was really like giving you an opportunity, essentially simulating what it's like being a PhD student. And I thought that experience was really cool because it gives you a bit more of a inside look of what it's like. And I also got pretty good vibes from like the students and the faculty, so I thought that was really good. And I think the third thing is that they definitely really stressed that the program offers a breadth. And what they mean by breadth is that you can always find a faculty member who specializes in a certain type of accounting research in a certain methodology or subject area. So that's great for me because even though I might have a particular interest where I want to, develop my depth in, I think it's good to have that breadth component as well, just so you're aware of what else is going on within the field of accounting research. So I think that was one key thing that they really wanted to stress in their program, because a lot of other universities, I guess, simply don't have that breadth component because they don't have the faculty to provide that breadth to their students. So, and that's something that I've definitely been seeing so far in my first semester in our accounting seminar class, where we're exposed to a bunch of different types of research methodologies and research areas within accounting. So because of those advantages, that's why I still think Waterloo was a great option for me to go to, and I'm definitely very happy about being a doctoral student here. Okay, so the next question is, how is the PhD program structured? So the way that the PhD program works at Waterloo is that it's split between coursework and your thesis. So your first 2 years, you're just doing courses. So here you're learning your basic fundamentals on accounting research and methodology. You're taking a lot of accounting, economics, a bit of psychology, maybe a bit of finance classes for 2 years. And then at the beginning of your third year, you essentially do a comprehensive exam that essentially tests you on everything that you did in your first 2 years in order to evaluate if you are ready for the thesis stage. And then year 3, you spend time to develop your thesis proposal. So this is essentially what you want to be doing as your dissertation. So you find a faculty advisor, you kind of pick a topic. And then years 4 and 5 is when you pretty much just work on your thesis full time. And hopefully at the end of 5 years, you have a piece of original work that you do your thesis defense, and then if that goes well, then you can graduate. So that's pretty much how the program is broken out. You have courses, and then you have your thesis proposal, and then you have your thesis, the 2 years that you're going to be focused on writing your thesis. Okay, so the next question is, how does funding work at your program? So a lot of doctoral students will get some sort of funding package from the university, and what funding is, or the way I see funding, is essentially your salary, because when you are a doctoral student, for every term, you must be either a TA or an RA. So I would say kind of consider that as like your part-time job as you're doing your studying. So for every week, I commit up to 10 hours of work so right now I'm an RA, so every week I do 10 hours of work with my professor, and then at the end of every month, I pretty much get like a check in order to compensate me for the work that I do. When it comes to the amount of funding, I believe it's kind of indexed based on the cost of living within your city. So the University of Toronto's funding package is more than what the University of Waterloo offers, because obviously living at Waterloo is a lot cheaper. But right now my funding package is around, I'd say $20,000 to $25,000. I don't know the exact number, but it's within that range. So I get a check at the end of each month, and that's pretty much like your salary that you can, pay your rent, pay for food and things like that. So you can definitely still live. Like, it's enough to like get a place, to get a roof over your head, and to buy food, but you're obviously not, balling out and going on vacations with that kind of money. It's pretty much enough to, cover your basic living needs, so you can focus full time on school. So if you're single, I think it's definitely doable in terms of living. If you have a family and you have to support kids, or if you have a partner that isn't working, then it becomes, obviously every dollar becomes a lot more stretched. So that's definitely something that you do need to consider. Okay, another common question that I've seen people ask is, do I need work experience before applying to a PhD program? So I'm going to say you don't need work experience before you apply. It can help in terms of when you're reading papers about, maybe if you read papers that are like set in a firm setting, or if you're reading papers like about audit, then because you've had work experience in an audit firm, then those types of papers are a little bit more easier to digest, and you kind of know what's going on because you kind of worked in that environment. But it's definitely not a requirement. There are students who simply do school, like they do their bachelor's, do their master's, and then you go straight into a doctoral program without ever doing any type of, real work. And that's totally fine. I think for me, I really want to get my CPA designation, which is why I decided to go work in the first place. And now that I'm in the PhD program, I do find that, just kind of like my background knowledge on what it's like working in the firm, or like why my manager makes certain decisions, that kind of knowledge kind of helps you as you're reading papers, and kind of helps contextualize, what's going on. So I don't think it's necessary, but it can help in terms of understanding the papers that you're reading. Next question is, what kind of interactions do you have with your accounting faculty? So one thing I'll say is that having a good relationship with the faculty is definitely very important, because especially in your thesis stage part of the program, you're going to be relying heavily on your supervisor in terms of guidance and helping you kind of get through that stage of the program. So because of COVID and the setting's a little bit unusual than what it's typically like, I don't have that much interaction with my accounting faculty, just because the only faculty I really see are if I have class with them or if I'm working with them as an RA. But if I was on campus, what I've been told is that there's essentially like a PhD office-y area where students tend to study, and then within that office there's like the professors kind of like visit by and things like that, and then you can have like your casual conversations and develop that relationship. But right now, just because of COVID, it's a lot harder to do that through Zoom, for example. So hopefully when the vaccine's out and we're all back on campus, then the interactions will be a lot more frequent, a lot more casual, but right now it's just a little tough to develop that relationship. Okay, next question is, what kind of competencies are needed to succeed in a PhD program? So mind you that I've only been doing this for about 2 to 3 months. I would say there's a couple competencies that really come up for me. The number one competency I would say is self-discipline. Because you're just kind of studying on your own and you only have 2 other classmates, a lot of the responsibilities in terms of keeping yourself accountable and getting the work done is your responsibility. And especially within this COVID era when you're kind of stuck in the same room for like the whole day and like your mental health is deteriorating, you have to figure out some sort of way to kind of keep yourself in check, and make sure that you get some sort of work done on an everyday basis so you don't have to like grind through all-nighters to meet deadlines and things like that. So I think that self-discipline, whether that's creating a tracker for yourself or setting up due dates in a calendar, or even like telling your family to like message you to help keep you in check, anything that you need to get done to make sure that you're disciplined is definitely very important. And I think the second competency is just perseverance. And the reason why I say that is that the first semester is definitely the hardest because you're just thrown into this whole new world. You only have 2 other classmates that's kind of helping you, and like your family doesn't really understand what's going on, and your friends might not really understand what's going on. So you might feel a little bit isolated and things like that. So having the will to keep pushing forward every single day, even though you don't understand what the hell is going on in class, is really important to essentially survive the next 4 to 5 years, because this is a big chunk of your life, and it's definitely a journey. So making sure that you can continually remind yourself, why you're going through all this hard work and why you're going through all this trouble, and constantly motivating yourself to keep going day after day, week after week, month after month, is really important. So I'll say those 2 competencies are definitely really key early on. My opinion might change maybe after the first semester, after the first year, but right now those 2 are pretty important. Okay, another question is, do I need to know my research interests before applying? I think that you need to have some sort of idea of what you're interested in, because that's why you're pursuing a PhD, right? You're pursuing a PhD because you have some sort of interest within a particular field that you really want to dig deeper on a whole new level and essentially dedicate your life to doing research. For me, the area of research that I'm kind of leaning towards is financial accounting, specifically archival, because that's what I've been most exposed to as an undergraduate and graduate student. But I do think it's important that if you're going to the program to keep an open mind in terms of that you might be exposed to a lot more new things that you haven't been exposed to before, and that might influence what you're actually interested in. So definitely keep an open mind, and I wouldn't be too strict about what you're interested in, especially in your first semester or your second semester. One thing I will say is that it does depend on the institution that you attend. So some institutions might have a particular research area and research focus that the faculty really excels at, and that's just how the program is built. Whereas other programs like Waterloo are a little bit more flexible and they have that breadth component where you have the flexibility of exploring every area and then making a decision, I guess in your second or in your third year. So I would say have some sort of an idea. It doesn't have to be completely concrete, but knowing what you're interested in will help you, especially in the application stage when you're trying to communicate to the admission committee why you're applying for a PhD and why you want to do research. Okay, so one of the more popular questions that we received in the open house was, what advice would you give to potential applicants who are interested in the program? Okay, so number one tip is that make sure you read and understand what the requirements are for admissions. So typically it's GMAT, either GMAT or GRE, test score, GPA have to hit a minimum requirement, and obviously there's like an essay component, and then there's references. So for me, I started on my application process super early. I reached out to my academic references and professional references I think 2 or 3 months in advance to kind of give them a heads up. And even before reaching out to them, I've kind of spoken to each of them on an individual level about my interests in doing a PhD. So this wasn't like something out of the blue for them. We've had that conversation. And so when I asked them for a reference, it went a lot more smoothly than I guess it could have been if I just kind of went out of the blue. Another thing I'll say about the references is that it's good to talk to them beforehand, and it's good to ask for references from professors or people at work that know you and can really speak to your ability and your competencies. So I had a good relationship with so the professional reference that I got was an EY partner that I worked on our clients for, and we had a pretty good working relationship. And then for my academic references, I had one professor and then the director of my master's program, which I had a good relationship with. And and I've actually been to like I guess their office hours to ask about being a PhD student and things like that. So that definitely helped it a lot. The biggest component for me that I struggled the most with and spent the most time working on was actually the GMAT. So if you checked out my other YouTube videos where I kind of talked about my experience going through the GMAT, that was definitely the hardest component for me to work on. And I would say that I started on that journey back in like the 4th year of undergrad when I had to write a GMAT for my master's degree. I ended up rewriting that again and going through the Manhattan GMAT prep because I knew I needed a much better score for a doctoral degree application. So that journey has been a very long one, but I'm glad that I started that early because I'm not the kind of guy that can like just read the book and then charge into a test center after 2 to 3 months and then ace it. That's just not who I am. I need to take time to develop it slowly, and that's what I did. So as you can probably tell, I've had the PhD thing at the back of my mind for years in advance, and I'm glad that I took that time to think about it early and then lay the foundation to the point where I could just submit my application. And then I guess the other key part of the application that I want to tell you guys about is the essay part. So really try to convey in your essay why you want to do a PhD and why you want to do research. And the reason why I say that is because I think that speaks volumes to your ability to stay within the program, right? The university is giving you funding, they're investing a lot of resources in you. So they're really trying to pick applicants that they believe will kind of stick through the 5 years, and not someone who would just quit after a year or two. So really trying to convey that, this is something that you're interested in, and that, I don't know, the way that I kind of roughly shaped mine was that I've always had an interest in accounting from a young age. And that's why I went to university for it, and I got my master's degree because of that. And throughout my, I guess, academic and professional experience, there were snippets where I felt that working wasn't really for me, and I worked on projects that was more focused on the, I guess, research side of accounting, and I found was really stimulating, and I realized that that's the kind of thing that I want to pursue for the rest of my life rather than working in a company. So that's very roughly what I said, but from that essay you can see that this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I kind of understand exactly what I need to get done to I guess get that PhD, because some people will say in their essay that, a PhD, I want to change the world, I want to like teach people, I want to do something meaningful. Like, sure, that sounds great, but it's really a bunch of empty words. At the end of the day, you're there because you find that stuff interesting, you're willing to like grind through the hours to develop new knowledge. And yeah, so definitely take the necessary time to work on your essay. This isn't something you can just like pump out within a week. Definitely give it a few months to really think about that question. Okay, next question is, what's your typical day? How much time do you spend on studying each week? So, typical day right now, within COVID, is that I wake up, I go to my desk, I stay there till the end of the day when the sun goes down, and then I go to sleep. That's pretty much what it is. But I think a more realistic thing is that kind of treat this as like a job. So if you study from 9 to 5, I would say that's the minimum that you should study. And obviously it's impossible to stay focused from 9 to 5. So typically what I'll do is like I'll take like an hour lunch break, whether that's gaming with the guys or just kind of closing my eyes for a little bit. I try to work out at least 3 to 4 times a week. Then obviously when there's a lecture, I'll attend the lecture. If it's a pre-recorded class, I'll try to space that out throughout the week so I don't feel too much of an information overload by watching all the videos at once. But I'll say your typical day it's for me at least, I try to start around 8:30 in the morning, and then I typically shut off the computer around 10 p.m. at night. And then the degree to which I'm focused throughout that time period it depends on the day, but it's definitely long hours. It kind of reminds me of working at the Big Four, to be honest, in terms of the number of hours that I spend, but that's just for the first semester right now. And I've been told that, it does get a lot easier in the second semester. So hopefully in 2021, the hours that I spend won't be as bad. But I would say just treat it as a job, 9 to 5 at least. And if you obviously need to spend more time studying, then you got to do what you got to do. Okay, so the next question is, how does a PhD program compare to an MBA program? So I've never done an MBA program before, so I can't really speak much about the details, but based on what I've seen and what I've heard, I think an MBA program is more of a extended networking session for working professionals who are looking for that leg up in order to get promoted within the company, or they're looking for other opportunities. So that's why they do an MBA. It's really, in my opinion, in terms of the coursework that you do, an extension of undergrad. So a lot of the courses that you're taking is just, I guess, a graduate level version of what you did in undergrad. There isn't a lot of research involved. It's mostly just coursework. And I think with an MBA, the main thing you want to get out of it is essentially a better job to expand your network and things like that. Whereas from a PhD perspective, your focus is pretty much research. So you're reading a lot of papers, you are learning about research methodology, and your goal at the end of the PhD is essentially to be hired as an assistant professor at another university. So I would say definitely different goals, both great programs, and I'm sure that the people who decide to do a PhD or the people who decide to do an MBA understand the difference between the two, but I definitely don't think that they are that similar. Although one thing I'll say is that you do see a lot of PhD students come from a MBA background, and I think that's totally fine as well. Okay, and then the final question that I have on my list is, what is a challenge in your studies? There's a lot of challenges, I would say. I guess I'll just kind of name out a couple of the bigger ones. So the first one is reading papers. I'm not a strong reader. I don't read for pleasure. But there's a lot of reading in a PhD program because you have to understand the literature in the area that you're interested in. And what that means is that you need to understand what kind of research has been done so far. And only by knowing that can you then determine how to move forward with the research. So it's a lot of reading, and I feel like now I've gotten better at reading and kind of keeping my eyes on the page and being focused and things like that. So that's definitely been a challenge. Another key challenge is that, especially for accounting PhD students, you'll be taking a couple economic courses, and you're taking those courses with economic grad students on a master's and PhD level. So these students who've done economics in their undergrad will be much more knowledgeable about the subject than you. Will probably have a much easier time with the subject than you. So I think the challenge here is not really knowing what's going on in your first month or two. And for me, that is in microeconomic theory and in econometrics, where I've definitely struggled a bit in terms of learning the material and making it stick in my mind. But luckily, to some degree, because it's COVID, these lectures are kind of pre-recorded, so I can keep watching the material time and time again. And I will say, by the fourth time I watched the lecture video, it's a lot more comprehensible than the first time that I've watched it. So it's a bit of a grind, but the mentality that I have here is that I'll extract what I can out of the course to help me with my accounting stuff. But other than that, I shouldn't sweat too much about it. As long as I give it my best, I'm sure it will work out in the end. But definitely a lot of challenges so far, and I'm sure like in every stage of the PhD, it's gonna have its own challenge. Like in the third year, my challenge is gonna be, what am I gonna do a thesis about? And then my fourth and fifth year challenge will be, God, there's so much to write. I need to get this done. So one challenge at a time. Okay, so that wraps up all the questions that I had. If you guys have any more questions that you want to ask me, then definitely leave a comment in the comment section below. But hopefully that gives you guys a bit of a high level overview of how to apply to a PhD, what it's like being a PhD student, and I guess some of the struggles, benefits that a PhD student has. So hopefully that was informative. And if you guys want more of these types of videos, definitely leave a comment in the comment section below, and I can definitely create a video for you guys. So with that being said, if you guys liked the video, consider subscribing to the channel, hit that thumbs up button, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of my future YouTube videos. So right now, I'm in the thick of it of my first term. Things are going to be super busy, and December 17th is the last day of my term. So wish me luck, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.